USSR and Soviet people are alive. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in the USSR. He announced the so-called perestroika. It means reconstruction, a course for the socio-economic acceleration of the country's development and for radical changes in foreign policy, called New Political Thinking. Gorbachev's first meeting with US President Ronald Reagan took place in Geneva in the fall of 1985, where the parties adopted the declaration on the inadmissibility of nuclear war. The document stated that there can be no winners in a nuclear war. The parties declared their refusal to seek military superiority over each other and reached an agreement to expand relations between the two countries. In domestic policy, elements of cost accounting and material incentives were introduced at state enterprises. In individual entrepreneurship and cooperative activities were permitted. In the countryside, along with state farms, collective farms, agricultural complexes, lease collectives and farms were opened. By 1990, it became clear that the idea of perestroika, reconstruction, had failed. The permitted and encouraged private initiative has turned into a campaign for illicit enrichment, for the legalization of funds obtained by criminal, illegal means. The Supreme Soviet of the USSR adopted a decree of June the 13th, 1990, on the concept of transition to a regulated market economy in the USSR. This decree provided for the denationalization of Soviet property, the establishment of joint stock companies, the development of private entrepreneurship, the idea of reforming socialism was buried. In March 1990, the Third Congress of People's Deputies of the USSR took place. It decided to establish the post of President of the USSR. Mikhail Gorbachev was elected President of the USSR at this Congress. But according to the Constitution of the USSR of 1977, Article 174, which was in force at that time. The amendment of the Constitution of the USSR can be made by a decision of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR adopted by a majority of at least 2/3 of the total number of deputies of each of its chambers. Neither the resolution nor the decision of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR in the period from the 10th to the 20th of March 1990 were adopted. Therefore, all the changes and additions made to the 1977 USSR Constitution by the deputies of the USSR Congress, including the post of the USSR President established by them, is also not legal. Not legal. Therefore, all documents signed by Gorbachev on behalf of the President of the USSR are null and void. The question is, what powers did Mikhail Gorbachev take off from himself in 1991? According to the Constitution of the USSR, there have never been any presidents of the USSR, and there cannot be. On June the 12th, 1990, at the First Congress of People's Deputies of the RSFSR, Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, on the initiative of Yeltsin, who was the chairman of the Supreme Soviet of the RSFSR, the Declaration on State Sovereignty of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic was adopted in violation of the content of Article 72 of the Constitution of the USSR of 1977 and the law of the USSR of the 3rd of April 1990, number 1409-1, on the procedure for resolving issues related to the secession of the Union Republic from the USSR. Article 2. The decision on the secession of the Union Republic from the USSR is taken by the free expression of the will of the peoples of the Union Republic through a referendum, which was not done. Nobody asked the opinion of Soviet citizens of the RSFSR. Thus, the Declaration of Independence of the RSFSR marked the beginning of the collapse of the USSR. In 1991, the 6th article of the USSR Constitution on the leading role of the CPSU was abolished. The process of forming new parties, mainly of anti-communist nature, began. Independence referendums were held in 6 republics. Therefore, at the initiative of the President of the USSR, Mikhail Gorbachev, a referendum on the preservation of the USSR was held on March the 17th, 1991, in which 76% of Soviet citizens spoke in favor of its preservation. 76% of Soviet citizens spoke in favor of the preservation of the USSR, excluding the population of 6 republics: Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Georgia, Moldova, and Armenia. The all-union referendum on March the 17th, 1991 is the last expression of the will of the Soviet people, at which they, by an overwhelming majority of votes, expressed their will to preserve and strengthen the USSR, to strictly observe socialist constitutional norms. Gorbachev raised the question before the leaders of the republics about the need to conclude a new union treaty about the formation of the Commonwealth of Sovereign States, a confederation with limited presidential power. This was the last attempt to preserve the USSR in any form. 9 of the 15 Union republics of Belarus, Kazakhstan, the USSR, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan were to become members of the new union, and also Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, Ukraine, and Turkmenistan could join them in the fall. On June the 12th, 1991, at the all-Russian elections, Yeltsin was elected president of the USSR, Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. According to the draft constitution of the Russian Federation of 1993, a citizen of the Russian Federation at least 35 years old, permanently residing in the Russian Federation for at least 10 years, can be elected president of the Russian Federation. If we proceed from the fact that December the 25th, 1991 is considered the date of the formation of the Russian Federation, according to the law number 2094-1 on renaming the USSR into the Russian Federation, it turns out that the first president of the Russian Federation could appear only after December the 26th, 2001. Yeltsin was inaugurated on August the 9th, 1996 as president of the Russian Federation, and Putin became president of the Russian Federation on May the 7th. in 2000, which doesn't correspond to the date of December the 26th, 2001, and Article 81, Part 2 of the draft Constitution of the Russian Federation. It turns out that both presidents are illegitimate. Thus, two presidents appeared in the country, both illegitimate from a legal point of view. Yeltsin wanted to rule the country alone, without Gorbachev. In order to eliminate the post of President of the USSR, it was necessary to destroy the USSR, which Yeltsin purposefully did. Not all of the high-ranking officials welcomed the planned conclusion of a new Union Treaty to replace the 1922 Treaty on the Establishment of the USSR. On August the 19th, 1991, a number of top leaders of the USSR decided to prevent the signing of a new Union Treaty, which was scheduled for August the 20th, 1991. Hoping to protect the USSR as a centralized state, they formed the State Emergency Committee in the USSR, GKChP. It was a self-proclaimed body of power in the USSR, which existed from the 18th of August to the 21st of August 1991, opposed the perestroika policy, reconstruction policy, pursued by the President of the USSR, Mikhail Gorbachev, and also against the signing of a new Union Treaty. On August the 19th, 1991, on the radio and then on the Central Television of the USSR, the announcers in the news program Время read an official text entitled Statement of the Soviet Leadership, in which it was reported that Gorbachev was not able to perform the duties of the President of the USSR. Powers are transferred to the Vice President of the USSR, Gennady Yanayev. Gorbachev at that time was on vacation in the Crimea. The statement said that proceeding from the results of a nationwide referendum on the preservation of the USSR, guided by the vital interests of the peoples of our motherland, all Soviet people, to establish that the Constitution of the USSR and the laws of the USSR have unconditional supremacy over the entire territory of the USSR, to govern the country and effectively implement the state of emergency, form the State Emergency Committee in the USSR, GKChP, consisting of 8 leaders of the USSR, including Minister of Defense, Yazov, Chairman of the KGB, Kryuchkov, Minister of Internal Affairs, Puga, and others. Yanayev was the acting president of the USSR. The State Emergency Committee was supported by the Deputy Minister of Defense of the USSR, General of the Army Varennikov. USSR Defense Minister Yazov brought troops and military equipment into Moscow on August the 19th, 1991. Boris Yeltsin refused to cooperate with the State Emergency Committee and didn't submit to the State Emergency Committee. The people were disoriented and didn't provide broad support for the Emergency Committee. On August the 21st, 1991, the Minister of Defense of the USSR, Yazov, gave the order to withdraw troops from Moscow to their places of permanent deployment. Vice President of the USSR Yanayev signed a decree in which the State Emergency Committee, GKChP in Russian, was declared dissolved, and all its decisions were invalid. The State Emergency Committee members were arrested and accused of treason. Also, in fact, everything was the other way around. It was these people who spoke out for the preservation of the USSR. These middle-aged people spent in prison for a year and a half. The process of the State Emergency Committee case began on April the 14th, 1993. At the trial, the defendants stated that the Russian court is not the legal successor of the Supreme Court of the USSR and has no right to consider cases of the highest officials of the former USSR. On February the 23rd, 1994, the defendants of the State Emergency Committee case were amnestied by the State Duma of the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation, and one of the defendants, Valentin Varennikov, refused to accept the amnesty, and the trial continued over him, which ended with a justification judgment, which means that the actions of the members of the State Emergency Committee of the USSR were justified by the Court of the Russian Federation, which means they were legal and legal. The military collegium of the Supreme Court of the Russian Federation terminated the proceedings in the State Emergency Committee case, GKChP case. The reaction to the GKChP was contradictory in the regions of Russia and the republics of the USSR. Some of the leaders recognized the State Emergency Committee. Some of them waited. The GKChP was strongly condemned by most Western countries. the Supreme Soviet of Russia, headed by Yeltsin, declared the State Emergency Committee outlawed. In August 1991, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia seceded from the USSR. In September 1991, the Fifth Extraordinary Congress of People's Deputies of the USSR adopted a decision to terminate its powers and dissolve itself. On December the 8th, 1991, in Belarus, in Belovezhskaya Pushcha, the leaders of the three Slavic republics, Russia, Yeltsin, Ukraine, Kravchuk, and Belarus, Shushkevich, announced the termination of the treaty on the formation of the USSR in 1922. The Belovezhskaya Agreement is the unofficial name of the agreement on the creation of the Commonwealth of Independent States, signed on December the 8th, 1991, by the Republic of Belarus, the Russian Federation, and Ukraine, as the founding states of the USSR, which signed the Treaty on the Formation of the USSR in 1922. In Russia, the Treaty on the Formation of the USSR in 1922 was denounced by the resolution of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR on December the 12th, 1991, number 2015-1, on the denunciation of the Treaty on the Formation of the USSR. Denunciation is duly formalized refusal of the state from the international treaty concluded by it. In the second half of December 1991, other Union republics, except for the Baltic republics and Georgia, joined the three Slavic republics. Looking ahead, it must be said that the State Duma of the Russian Federation on March the 15th, 1996, adopted the decree of the State Duma of the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation, number 157-2, on the legal force for the Russian Federation, Russia, of the results of the USSR referendum on March the 17th, 1991, on the issue of preserving the USSR, and confirmed that the agreement on the establishment of the Commonwealth of Independent States of December the 8th, 1991, not approved by the Congress of People's Deputies of the USSR, the highest body of state power of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, didn't have and doesn't have legal force in the part related to the termination, the existence of the USSR. As a result, the Belovezhskaya Agreement led to the collapse of the USSR, was concluded against the expressed will of the sovereign people at the referendum on March the 17th, 1991, on the preservation of the USSR, and therefore have a criminal character, constitute in their legal essence an act of state treason, and as such must be condemned and rejected by all subjects of international law, who recognized the Soviet people as the master of the country, called the USSR, and the undivided owner of the supreme power in it. According to Clause 2 of the Treaty on the Formation of the USSR in 1922, the approval, amendment, and addition of the Union Treaty are subject to the exclusive jurisdiction of the Congress of Soviets of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, and not to some presidents of the republics, even if all taken together. The very same procedure for the republic's withdrawal from the Union Treaty was regulated by a special law, the USSR law, on the procedure for solving issues related to secession of the Union Republic from the USSR. Number 1409-1, dated the 3rd of April 1990, and provides for the solution of the issue only in a referendum and the adoption of a decision by a number of votes 2/3 of the list of voters. Not only the legislation of the USSR was violated, but also of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, USSR. The constitution of the USSR was violated when the Belовежское Agreement was signed. In particular, Article 5. The most important issues of state life are brought up for a nationwide discussion and also put up for a nationwide vote, referendum. Today, we have the expression of the will of the Soviet citizens at the referendum on March the 17th, 1991, on the preservation of the USSR. 76% of the votes in favor. 76%. And the decision of the Congress of People's Deputies of the USSR on the operation of the laws and the Constitution of the USSR. At the same time, 73% of the voters of the USSR at the Union referendum spoke in favor of preserving the Union Treaty of 1922. In opposition to this expression of the will of the voters and the Congress, a legally void transaction of the President of the USSR in Belовежская Пуща was carried out, not approved by the Congress of People's Deputies and not approved by a referendum. The Belовежская deal took place behind the back of the President of the USSR, Mikhail Gorbachev. He was not notified of what was happening in Belовежская Пуща, and the leaders of other republics of the USSR didn't know about it either. Immediately after the signing of the Belovezhsky Agreement on the creation of the Commonwealth of Independent States, which took place on December the 8th, 1991, Yeltsin first called U.S. President George Bush. They talked for 28 minutes. And 2 weeks later, on December the 25th, Mikhail Gorbachev called George Bush. This happened right before he officially resigned as President of the USSR. The conversation lasted 22 minutes. During a conversation with the elder Bush, Yeltsin reported to him that a very important event had taken place in Russia, and he would like to personally inform Bush before he learns about it from the press. The leaders of the three republics, Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia, got together and signed the agreement on the Community of Independent States of Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. Yeltsin told Bush that President Gorbachev was unaware of these results. The Russian Federation proclaimed itself the legal successor of the USSR in the international arena on the basis of the resolution of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR dated December the 12th, 1991, number 2015-1, on the denunciation of the Treaty on the formation of the USSR. On December the 24th, 1991, Yeltsin continued his criminal activities and notified the United Nations General Secretary that the membership of the Soviet Union in the United Nations would continue with the support of the members of the Commonwealth of the Independent States of the Russian Federation. But Russia doesn't have the right to be present at the United Nations. Why? After the USSR lost in the Third Cold War, which ended in its collapse, the United Nations General Assembly didn't amend the organization's charter. In chapters 5 and 19 of the United Nations Charter, the name of a non-existent United Nations member, USSR, remains. For reasons of false political expediency, the international community applied the concept of state continuity to the Russian Federation, and by default retained the USSR's legal succession in the United Nations. Yeltsin wanted to single-handedly rule the country. Therefore, he decided to change the constitution. On September the 21st, 1993, Yeltsin signed the decree of the President of the Russian Federation, number 1400, on a phased constitutional reform in the Russian Federation. The decree dissolved the Congress of People's Deputies and the Supreme Soviet of the Russian Federation. The decree provided for the creation of bicameral parliament, the Federal Assembly, consisting of the State Duma and the Federation Council. On the same day, on September the 21st, 1993, the Constitutional Court declared Yeltsin's actions were unconstitutional and decided that signing of the decree served as the basis for dismissing Yeltsin from the presidency. On the same day, on September the 21st, the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet terminated Yeltsin's powers as President of the Russian Federation. The duties of the President of the Russian Federation passed to Rudskoy, Alexander Rudskoy. On September the 24th, 1993, the Congress of People's Deputies assessed the President's actions as a coup d'etat, recognized all legal acts signed by Yeltsin starting from the 8 o'clock p.m. on September the 21st without legal force. The preparation and implementation of Decree number 1400 took place with the consent and with the active consultation of senior U.S. officials, in particular President Bill Clinton, as well as Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, Helmut Kohl. The Supreme Soviet of the Russian Federation deprived Yeltsin of the presidency. Then Yeltsin decided to liquidate the Supreme Soviet by force, take by storm, and arrest. On October the 3rd and 4th, 1993, in the center of Moscow, troops loyal to Yeltsin stormed the House of Soviets, where the Supreme Soviet of the Russian Federation was located, which led to numerous casualties, including among the civilian population. In those days, on October the 3rd and 4th, at least 124 people died and 384 were injured, according to official sources. The Supreme Council was defeated. Thus, ousted President Yeltsin carried out a coup d'etat by armed means. Yeltsin hastened to legitimize his victory in the new constitution. The decision to prepare the draft of the new Russian constitution was adopted by the First Congress of People's Deputies of the USSR on June the 16th, 1991. The Constitutional Commission was formed by the Congress. Its chairman was approved by the chairman of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR, Yeltsin. The secretary of the commission was People's Deputy Rumyantsev. The Sixth Congress of People's Deputies of Russia approved the draft constitution presented by the Constitutional Commission and instructed the Supreme Council and the Constitutional Commission to complete the revision of the draft, taking into account the proposals and comments made. Meanwhile, Yeltsin, as the chairman of the Constitutional Commission, dissatisfied with the allegedly unclear legal division of powers between the President, Parliament, and the government, refused to further cooperation with the Constitutional Commission and urgently and secretly began to legalize his draft constitution of the Russian Federation by means of his supporters from the so-called Constitutional Conference created by him. All the developments of the lawful Constitutional Commission were discarded as unnecessary rubbish. The guarantor of the Constitution entrusted the preparation of his project to the juridical clerks Alexeyev, Shahrai, Sobchak, and Baturin. Yeltsin needed a constitution with a strong president, endowed with unlimited powers. He needed a legal camouflage of the September-October 1993 tragedy. This task was successfully resolved by highly qualified lawyers. According to the legislation in force at that time, the adoption of the new constitution of the Russian Federation could only be carried out at an all-Russian referendum in full compliance with the federal law on the USSR referendum, which was in force and became invalid only in 1995. When holding a referendum, decisions are considered adopted if more than half of the citizens of the USSR included in the list for participation in the referendum voted for them. At the same time, a referendum could only be called by the Congress of People's Deputies or the Supreme Soviet of the Russian Federation. Violating the law on the referendum of the USSR, citizen Boris Yeltsin, since he was no longer president, on October the 15th, 1993, signed a new decree on the nationwide vote on the draft constitution of Russia and approved the regulations on the nationwide vote on the draft Russian Constitution Federation on December the 12th, 1993. According to the regulations, the new constitution was considered approved if the majority of voters who took part in voting voted for its adoption. The term nationwide vote, but not referendum, was used to bypass the requirements of the law on the USSR referendum in force at that time. The law on the referendum of the USSR established that decisions are considered adopted if more than half of the citizens included in the voter lists voted for them. Then, according to Yeltsin's regulations, the constitution is considered adopted if 50% of the voters who took part in voting voted for it. On December the 12th, 1993, a vote was held in the Russian Federation on the new Yeltsin constitution. The turnout of voters was about 55%. More than 58% of them voted for the new constitution, which was 31% of the number of registered voters in Russia. Only 31% of the numbers of registered voters in Russia, which is less than half of all voters. The constitution didn't receive support in 17 regions of the Russian Federation. In the conclusions of the expert group under the presidential administration about large-scale falsifications in voting for the constitution of the Russian Federation, it was argued that in fact no more than 46% of the voters on the list took part in the voting. That is even significantly less than half of the registered voters voted in favor of the new constitution. This means that, speaking in legal language, the constitution that was supposedly approved, then and currently in force, is illegitimate and has no legal force to this day. Citizens of the USSR with USSR passports in their hands, living on the territory of the USSR, took part in the voting for the Constitution of the Russian Federation. The law on Russian citizenship appeared only in 2002. There were no Russian citizens in 1993 yet. The ballots were destroyed on the third day after the voting. This raises serious doubts about the fairness of the voting. Thus, the Yeltsin Constitution is not the basic law, a normative legal act of the highest legal force, as it is considered in world practice. Recorded in the second section of the Yeltsin Constitution, the asserting statement simultaneously terminates the operation of the Constitution of the Russian Federation, Russia, adopted on April the 12th, 1978. From a legal point of view, it is a pure legal fiction. A constitution without the status of the basic law cannot cancel a constitution with such a status. The associates, lawyers who wrote the constitution for Yeltsin probably understood that their actions fell under the articles of the USSR criminal code in force at that time. These were especially dangerous state crimes and were subject to the court under the USSR criminal code. With their help, the state, Russian Federation, with all its branches of power and laws, is still a fictitious, illegal formation. That according to all international legal norms of the Constitution of the USSR of 1978 continues to operate in the country. The laws which have not been cancelled by anyone. The laws of the USSR have priority over the laws of the USSR and the Russian Federation. This article is unshakable, regardless of whether we recognize the adoption of the Constitution of the Russian Federation of 1993 or not. The Article 15 of the Constitution of the Russian Federation establishes the priority of international law and an international treaty, and the Union Treaty of 1922 is international. This article was not amended in 2020 at the time of the amendment of the Russian Constitution. The authoritarian Yeltsin Constitution of 1993, in terms of its parameters, was a huge step back in comparison even with the amended Constitution of the Russian Federation, which was in force until 1993. The Constitution made the President and government unaccountable to anyone. It brought the Constitutional Court under their control, thus ending the independence of the judiciary. Parliament, the Federal Assembly, has become a mere decoration of an authoritarian regime, a voting machine. The new constitution even more acquired the features of oligarchy and corruption. The proclaimed legal and social state became a slogan, and the socio-economic rights of citizens in comparison with the Constitution of the USSR of 1978 turned into a fiction. For almost 30 years now, the country has been living in an illegitimate constitutional field. Neither the Constitutional Court nor the Russian legal community even tries to raise the issue of the illegitimacy of the Constitution of the Russian Federation. More than that, the Constitutional Court itself uses the illegitimate Constitution as a criterion for its activity. The legal community closed its eyes and continue the games imposed on the country at the time of the September-October 1993 coup d'etat. What conclusions should be made? The Russian Federation is an illegal entity created on the territory of the USSR in 1991-1993 through multiple legal, economic, and war crimes. Russian Federation is not a state. The purpose of this organization is to involve all the confused citizens of the USSR in their criminal community for their systematic robbery and the appropriation of the results of their labor. The draft constitution of the Russian Federation has no legal force and is null and void by definition. On December the 12th, 1993, USSR citizens with USSR passports voted for the constitution of another state. The 1977 constitution of the USSR has never been cancelled and is still in effect. The virtual, illegitimate private foreign commercial company Russian Federation has never been the legal successor of the USSR. There was no act of transfer from the Soviet Union to the Russian Federation. All indigenous citizens, children and grandchildren are under the jurisdiction and legal framework of the USSR. None of the Soviet citizens went through the procedure for renouncing the citizenship of the USSR. No one wrote applications for renouncing the citizenship of the USSR. On the basis of Article 17 of the law of the 1st of August 1978 on citizenship of the USSR, number 8497-9, renunciation of citizenship of the USSR was permitted by the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR on the basis of an application by a person applying for renunciation of citizenship. Soviet citizens did not write applications for the adoption of Russian Federation citizenship. No one has the right to change a person's citizenship without his consent. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 15, Paragraph 1. Everyone has the right to a citizenship. Paragraph 2. No one can be arbitrarily deprived of his citizenship or the right to change his citizenship. Therefore, we are still Soviet citizens.